So our first one that we're going to talk about is identity. And what I want you to do is I want you to think about your client, and we're going to put it on a gradient, because no personality or no disorder is categorical. It never was, but finally, now with the DSM-5, it pushed us more towards a dimensional model, whereas before it was like, well, I mean, if you have borderline, you have borderline. If you have narcissistic, you have narcissistic. If you have bipolar, you have bipolar. But we know that it's different, right? The different traits expressed more intensely or less so in others, in different people. So what I want you to do is think about your client who you believe could be along the narcissistic spectrum. Maybe it's someone you know, maybe it's someone in your life. I don't know, right? And is it little to no impairment, some impairment, moderate impairment, severe, or extreme? For example, we'll start with identity. It's excessive reference to others for self-definition and self-esteem. Regulation. It is exaggerated self-appraisal, inflated or deflated, vacillating between extremes. And that's also really important. So their identity is extreme on one end, extreme on the other. So it's a split. A lot of us tend to think that only individuals that are along the BPD spectrum are splitting. That's absolutely not true. Individuals with PTSD split, individuals with narcissistic personality disorder split, individuals with antisocial split. So, I mean, just important to be aware of that. And here, when you look at their identity, that they tend to fluctuate between those extremes, because they have this great, I'm this wonderful, perfect, just incredible person, and anybody would be lucky to have me. And I look fantastic. I am fantastic. And you know what? Even after the gym, I smell fantastic. And we all don't smell great after the gym, but these people say they do. Okay. Now, also, it's emotional regulation mirrors fluctuation in self-esteem. Now, this is really important, because how they feel about themselves equates to how well they can control their behavior. So if they're with, like Peter, with his boss, constant challenge to Peter's identity, constantly. Here's this engineer with a PhD who he has to report to, who isn't perfect, who doesn't do everything right. Can you believe it? People with PhDs, that they're not perfect. I know, it's just so crazy, but it's true. But his expectation is, if you've gone this far in school, and if you are going to be telling me what to do, you darn well better have the answer to every possible question that I could imagine. And obviously he doesn't matter what your education is. No one can answer every crazy question that people have, okay? Or every question that people have. So it was this constant, when Peter felt unsafe, right? Or he felt scared. Now, he wouldn't call it that, right? He would call it pissed. He would call it angry. But underneath that, it was more of this scared individual and this very, very uncertain individual. So his sense of self would go down. So then he was at a greater likelihood to act out. And that act out was he would be passive aggressive with his boss. And as soon, by the way, just as an aside, as soon as I know that one of my clients utilize a passive aggressive response pattern, I always think in my head, that's a real likelihood that that's going to be used on me someday, if we continue right down that road. And I don't mind the tactic, but I'm just going to call you on it. You just have to, I'm not going to call you on it right there, because you wouldn't do that with Peter, because that narcissistic wound we talked about. So again, we're looking at that identity. Now, all right, then we have self-direction. And this is really interesting, because I think goal setting is based on gaining approval from others. Personal standards are unreasonably high in order to see oneself as exceptional, or too low based on a sense of entitlement, often unaware of their own motivations. First of all, that's that impaired insight that we talk about. And what happens is most individuals along narcissistic spectrum, Peter got his bachelor's. I think a bachelor's is probably about average for these individuals, but a lot of individuals along the narcissistic spectrum, they don't go to college. A lot of them, they will often not only friend down, I don't know if you've heard that term before, but friending down. A lot of my clients, particularly those with BPD, say that a lot. And I know I friend down. It's like having friends that you know really aren't great for you and that really probably you don't connect with a lot, but you sacrifice your sense of self to be with them. In narcissistic personality disorder, you friend down to people that are dumber, people that are easily manipulated, or people who you've enlisted, and we're going to talk about enlistment a little later, but people that you've enlisted into your interpersonal circle who you can manipulate and strong arm to doing what you want them to do. And often they are very limited in their vocations, those with narcissistic personality disorder, because they don't want to risk going for a job they might really, really want. And if they don't get it, it's a narcissistic wound. It hits that self-doubt, shame, guilt, inferiority. I mean, it just hits that core content. It creates that narcissistic wound. Empathy, impaired ability to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. They're excessively attuned to reactions of others, but only if perceived as relevant to self. So their empathy is very constricted because they're like, oh, well, my boss is in a bad mood. All right, how does that impact me? Now, they don't think like that. They notice the bad mood, and then they're likely to kind of stay away, or tactically, if they don't like the boss, maybe to make their day worse in a passive aggressive manner. But again, so they have no empathy for what that person may be going through. They don't bother to stop and think, you know what, that guy's probably having a bad day. Maybe today isn't the day to bother him. Nope. Peter has a right to know what he wants to know when he wants to know it. So if you have a bad day, that's too bad for you and your little PhD that you got. And so he is going to go in there and he is going to hit him with those same obnoxious questions that is likely to get him fired. Okay. And there's over or underestimation of own effect on others. So typically what you see is for the grandiose narcissists, you see that they tend to say, oh, well, you know what? He's probably upset about me because he knows I'm going to get that promotion. He knows I'm going to be his boss. That's his problem. That's what he's upset about. Right. So they have no empathy, very, very impaired empathy. And it's different than, say, your genuine psychopath. So psychopaths, they're emotionally impaired where they really can't empathize. And they don't try, but they're impaired. However, and that's a whole nother seminar right there. But for narcissists, they can empathize. They have that ability. They just don't care enough to do it. And there's actually a lot of very interesting studies out there that actually show that they can be empathic if it's directly to their advantage, but they just don't care enough to do it. Intimacy. Relationships are largely superficial and they exist to serve their own self-esteem regulation. Adversely impacts both partners by little genuine interest in others' experiences. And relationships are massively skewed. And a lot of times what happens, and I think that this is becoming more of a norm as well, is that marriages that are strained, partners that are jerky, particularly men partners that are jerky. A lot of times I'll have folks say, oh, well, I mean, my husband's a narcissist. Oh, well, what makes you think that? Oh, he doesn't take out the trash. He doesn't ask me how I'm doing. I mean, those aren't components of narcissism. I mean, maybe they are a narcissist. I don't know. But I think that they use that label. They're basically saying, I really don't think much of my partner, or I think that they're impaired. And I don't know if there's any hope for them at all. I mean, that's definitely a conveyance of that relationship probably ain't going too great. But I think that intimacy is so skewed because narcissists, if they want something out of a partner, or particularly a romantic partner, or if it's a sexual conquest that they want, that might feed their ego state, then they're very charming. Now, they're not, when I say very charming, doesn't mean they're good at it. Some are good at it, some aren't. But the ones that are good at it, man, oh man, are they charming. I'm telling you, they know to take you out to dinner. They know to be really sweet. They know to give you a lot of attention. They know to do all this other stuff. They know to do. But I'm telling you, as soon as they have reached their goal, they're done. They're out.